I entered the house quietly, balancing a brown paper bag in one hand and a bottle of Pinot Noir in the other. My steps were deliberate, the silence amplifying the faint creak of the floor beneath me. I felt an unusual sense of accomplishment. The parent-teacher conference at the high school had wrapped up earlier than expected, and I was excited to surprise Emma with her favorite dinner and wine. We both needed this. At 35, juggling her demanding career in marketing and our increasingly busy lives had made time together rare. I was 37, often caught up with work as a history teacher, leaving little energy for evenings at home. Tonight was supposed to be simple, a quiet meal, some easy conversation, and maybe finishing the movie we'd started weeks ago but never got around to watching. The mundane routine of it felt comforting, but the house was eerily still. Emma usually kept music playing on her phone while she cooked or folded laundry. Always something upbeat, or a podcast about urban legends in our city of Portland, Oregon. I set the bag on the kitchen counter, my ears straining for any sound, but there was nothing. "Emma?" I called softly, not wanting to shatter the unusual calm. No response. The kitchen was spotless, almost unnervingly so. I stepped into the hallway, gripping the bottle a little tighter as I moved past the framed photos of us on vacations, smiling at the camera. As I climbed the stairs, a faint glow caught my attention. The light in our bedroom was on, and the door was slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light cutting across the dark hallway. That's when I heard it. Laughter. Hers. Unmistakably, but with a tone I didn't recognize. It wasn't the familiar laugh I heard when she joked with me or her coworkers. This laugh was lighter, softer, almost flirtatious. My steps slowed, my heart picking up its pace. A voice followed, a deep, casual, male voice. I stopped outside the door, every muscle in my body tensing. Through the narrow gap, I saw her, Emma, lounging on the bed, her legs stretched out casually, her back propped up against the pillows. She was wearing the soft lavender robe I'd given her on our 5th anniversary. It slipped slightly off her shoulder, framing her in a way that felt deliberate, stage even. Her phone was positioned perfectly on a pillow in front of her, the camera angled toward her. She hadn't noticed me. "This weekend, of course," she said, her voice low and playful. "I'd love that." She smiled an unguarded, genuine smile I hadn't seen in a long time. It was a smile I thought was meant for me. The man's voice crackled through the speaker, though I couldn't make out the words. His tone was intimate, the kind that left no room for misinterpretation. "See you soon, babe," he said. The world shifted beneath me. My grip tightened on the bottle of wine, its chill seeping into my hand. My chest felt heavy, as though the air had been sucked out of the room. I stepped back, accidentally nudging the door. It creaked. Emma's head snapped up, her eyes widened as they locked onto mine. In an instant, her expression shifted from relaxed to panicked. "Liam," she stammered, scrambling to grab her phone. Her fingers fumbled as she swiped at the screen, ending the call. I said nothing. I stood there, frozen, watching her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emma sat frozen, her phone clutched in her hands like a lifeline. Her cheeks flushed, a mix of guilt and indignation flickering across her face. "Liam, I can explain," she said, her voice trembling but edged with something else, something defensive. I didn't respond. Instead, I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms and letting the weight of the moment press down on her. Her eyes darted to the phone, then back to me. "It's not what you think," she added hastily. The cliché rang hollow in the charged air between us. "It's not what I think." My voice was low, almost calm, though my pulse roared in my ears. "You were lying in our bed, calling another man babe, and making plans for the weekend. So, please, Emma, enlighten me. What exactly am I supposed to think?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, her face paling. "He's just a friend," she said finally. The words sounded rehearsed, even as they left her lips. "A friend?" I echoed, disbelief creeping into my tone. Since when do friends get to hear that laugh or make plans with you while you're sitting in our bedroom, wearing that? I gestured toward her robe, the fabric hanging loosely around her shoulders. Her jaw tightened, her gaze flickering between defiance and desperation. You don't understand, she muttered. You're right, I snapped, my calm facade cracking. I don't understand. So, why don't you help me out? She took a deep breath, sitting up straighter. Liam, you've been so distant lately. Always at work, always tired. When you're home, I've been feeling invisible. Invisible? The word hit like a slap. So, your solution was to what? Go behind my back and invite another man into your life? That's how you deal with feeling invisible. It wasn't like that. She shot back, her voice rising. It started as nothing, just someone to talk to, someone who noticed me. I stared at her, my mind spinning. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint buzz of the phone still clutched in her hand. And now, I asked, my voice cold, because it doesn't look like just talking anymore. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the phone. I don't know, she said finally, her voice small. I don't know what it is anymore. I let out a bitter laugh, stepping back from the doorway. You don't know? That's reassuring. She stood, her movements quick and frantic. Liam, please. I never meant for it to go this far. I was lonely, and you don't. I interrupted sharply, my voice slicing through hers. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. I turned and walked out, my steps heavy on the stairs. She called after me, her voice trembling, but I didn't stop. I ended up at Aiden's house that night, my best friend since college, and someone who had always been my anchor in moments of crisis. He opened the door immediately, taking in my expression and ushering me inside without a word. I told him everything, Emma, the phone call, the excuses. He listened quietly, his jaw tightening as I spoke. When I finally finished, he let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. Man, he said, his voice low, I don't even know what to say. There's nothing to say, I replied, slumping onto his couch. I don't even know what to do. Aiden sat across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. What do you want to do, Liam? He asked. Because whatever it is, you need to be clear. You can't let her spin this into something it's not. I need to confront her, I said, the words coming out before I'd fully processed them. I need the truth. All of it. No more excuses, no more deflections. Just the truth. Good, he said, nodding firmly. But don't let her manipulate you. You deserve to know what's really going on, no matter how ugly it is. I stayed at Aiden's that night, unable to face the thought of going back to the house. The next morning, the weight of the confrontation had settled heavily on my shoulders as I drove back. When I arrived, Emma was in the kitchen, stirring a cup of coffee as if nothing had happened. She looked up as I walked in, her expression unreadable. Liam, she said softly, setting the mug down. Can we talk? I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. That depends. Are you actually going to tell me the truth this time? Her cheeks flushed, and she looked away. I've told you everything. It's not what you're making it out to be. Stop lying to me, I said, my voice firm. I deserve better than that, Emma. If you can't be honest, then there's nothing left to say. For a moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on the floor. Then she let out a shaky breath, looking up at me with tears brimming in her eyes. You're right, she whispered. I haven't told you everything. I stood there, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a tidal wave. Then start talking, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. Emma glanced at the mug in front of her, gripping the edge of the counter as if it might keep her grounded. It started months ago, she admitted, her voice trembling. At first, it really was just talking. We met at a conference in Seattle, one of those marketing networking events. He was charming, easy to talk to. I didn't think much of it at the time. Seattle? I interrupted, my mind racing back to the weekend she'd said she was working late on a client pitch. She nodded, guilt flashing across her face. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd overthink it, and I told myself it wasn't a big deal. But then we started texting. It was innocent at first, I swear, but it felt good to have someone notice me. To feel seen again. The word seen again stung sharper than I expected. So what changed, Emma? When did it stop being innocent? She hesitated, her eyes darting to the side. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe it was when I started looking forward to his messages more than yours. Or when I started making excuses to see him. It just happened. It just happened. I repeated, bitterness dripping from every word. You didn't accidentally book a hotel room. You didn't accidentally call him, babe. Don't try to make this sound like some passive mistake. Emma's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, she looked completely defeated. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said quietly. I need you to understand how lonely I've been. You've been so wrapped up in your job, in everything else, that I felt like I didn't matter anymore. I shook my head, the anger bubbling beneath the surface. So it's my fault? I said, laughing bitterly. You're blaming this on me because I work hard to provide for us. No, she snapped, her voice cracking. I'm not blaming you. I'm just trying to explain how it got to this point. Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Who is he? I demanded finally. Her eyes widened slightly and she stepped back. Liam, who is he? I repeated, my voice steady but unrelenting. His name is Ryan, she said after a long pause. He's married too. It wasn't supposed to go this far, I swear. But it's complicated now. Complicated? I said, shaking my head in disbelief. Do you hear yourself? You've built this entire web of lies, and now you're telling me it's complicated? What's complicated about cheating on your husband and lying to his face? Emma opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the doorbell rang. The sudden sound cut through the tension like a knife. We both froze, staring at each other. I'm not expecting anyone, I said, moving toward the door. Emma's face turned pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Wait, she said quickly, stepping forward. Liam, don't. I ignored her, my hand already on the doorknob. When I opened it, I was met with a man in his mid-30s, tall with dark hair and a confident posture. Liam, I assume, he said, his voice smooth and measured. Who the hell are you? I asked, my grip tightening on the door. I'm Ryan, he said casually, as if he were introducing himself at a dinner party. Time seemed to stop. The man standing in front of me wasn't just some stranger. He was the man I'd heard over the phone. The man Emma had led into our life without my knowledge. I turned to Emma, who stood frozen a few feet behind me, her face drained of color. Emma, I said slowly, my voice cold. You want to explain this? Emma stood motionless, her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. Ryan glanced between us, an infuriatingly calm expression on his face. Well, this is awkward, he said with a dry chuckle, stepping just inside the doorway. Uninvited, I shot him a glare that could have melted steel. You've got 5 seconds to explain why you're here before I throw you out. Liam, wait, Emma finally managed to say, stepping forward, her voice shaky. Ryan, you shouldn't be here. Ryan ignored her, focusing his attention on me. I came to clear the air, he said, folding his arms. I figured it was about time we all got on the same page. I blinked, struggling to process the sheer audacity of the situation. The same page? I said, my voice dangerously low. You think walking into my house and playing mediator is going to fix this? Emma moved closer to Ryan, her hands outstretched as if to calm the situation. Ryan, please, this isn't helping. Oh, isn't it? He said, raising an eyebrow. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like he doesn't have the full story yet. My jaw tightened. What full story? Ryan turned his attention back to me, his expression smug. "Did she tell you about the baby yet?" Time stopped. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Ryan!" she hissed, her voice full of panic. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "The baby?" I echoed, the words barely a whisper. Ryan smirked, leaning casually against the doorframe. "That's right. Emma's pregnant, and it's mine." The air left my lungs, as if I'd been punched in the stomach. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. "Emma," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Is this true?" She took a step toward me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Liam, I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." "You didn't know how?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You thought it would be better for me to hear it from him." I jabbed a finger toward Ryan, who was watching the scene unfold like he was enjoying a reality show. "Liam, I'm sorry," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I never meant for it to go this far." "Stop saying that," I roared, slamming my hand against the doorframe. "You don't get to act like this just happened. You made these choices, Emma. You decided to betray me." Ryan let out a low whistle. "Well, this is getting intense. Maybe I should." "You should leave," I snapped, cutting him off. Ryan held up his hands in mock surrender. All right. No need to get violent." He stepped back out the door, pausing just long enough to smirk at Emma. "Call me later." Before I could stop myself, I slammed the door shut behind him, the sound reverberating through the house. I turned back to Emma, my hands shaking. "How long?" I demanded. She wiped at her eyes, her tears streaking down her face. "What? How long have you been lying to me?" I asked, my voice cold and clipped. "How long has this been going on?" Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. "Almost a year," she admitted. "A year?" I repeated. "You've been living a double life for a year?" "It wasn't like that," she said, her voice pleading. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. You weren't trying to hurt me?" I interrupted, my voice full of disbelief. "Emma, you've destroyed everything. Our marriage, our trust, everything. And now you expect me to believe that you didn't mean for this to happen." She covered her face with her hands, her sobs muffled. I couldn't look at her anymore. The woman standing in front of me was a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, the sound of her cries following me as I stepped into the cool Portland air. I didn't go back to the house that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of Portland. The city lights blurred through the windshield as my mind spiraled. Every moment of the last year replayed itself in agonizing detail. The late-night excuses, the distant looks, the lies I'd been too trusting to question. Eventually, I found myself parked outside Aiden's house. The porch light was on, and I could see him sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone with his dog curled up at his feet. I knocked softly, and he opened the door almost immediately, his expression shifting to concern when he saw me. "Liam," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "What happened?" I collapsed onto the couch and stared at the floor, my hands shaking. "She's pregnant," I said finally, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Aiden froze. "Wait, what?" "And it's not mine," I added, my voice flat. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Man, I don't even know what to say. That's a whole new level." I nodded numbly. "It's Ryan's. He showed up at the house to tell me." Aiden blinked stunned. "He showed up? What the hell is wrong with that guy?" "I don't know," I muttered. "And honestly, I don't care. I can't do this anymore, Aiden. I'm done. She lied to me for a year, a whole year, and now she's carrying his kid." Aiden finished a thought for me. "Yeah, man, I'd say that's reason enough to be done." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft hum of the ceiling fan above us. You're going to need to protect yourself, Aiden said eventually. Whatever happens next, you can't let her twist this back on you. The divorce process began the next day. My lawyer was relentless. Using every piece of evidence I had, the emails, the texts, the recording of her call with Ryan, to make sure the separation was as clean as possible. I wanted nothing from her but my freedom. Emma, surprisingly, didn't put up much of a fight, whether it was guilt or exhaustion. She signed the papers without argument, agreeing to the terms my lawyer laid out. She sent me a single text after it was finalized. I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope you find happiness. The message lingered on my phone, unread and unanswered, until I finally deleted it. It wasn't closure, but it was as close as I was going to get. The weeks that followed were quiet but heavy. I moved into a small apartment in Northeast Portland, a modest space that felt alien after the house I'd shared with Emma. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, but it was mine. Work became my sanctuary. My students, oblivious to the turmoil I was facing, brought a sense of normalcy to my days. I threw myself into lesson planning and extracurricular activities, finding solace in the structure they provided. Aiden checked in regularly, dragging me out of the apartment for beers or basketball games whenever he sensed I was retreating too far into myself. "You're doing all right," he said one evening as we sat on the patio of a local bar. "Better than I thought you would. Honestly." "Thanks, I guess," I replied, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. He leaned back, studying me. "You're not carrying it anymore. The anger, the weight of everything she did. It's not hanging on you like it used to." I thought about that for a moment, realizing he was right. The wounds Emma had left were still there, but they no longer consumed me. They were scars now, painful but evidence of survival. Months later, life began to settle into a new rhythm. I decorated the apartment, turning it into a space that felt like home. I picked up hobbies I'd long abandoned: photography, hiking, even cooking. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, their support a reminder of the life I still had outside of what I'd lost. One evening, I was grading papers when a knock at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, a woman stood there. She was in her early 30s, with bright blue eyes and an attentive smile. "Hi," she said, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "You don't know me, but I'm Claire, Ryan's wife." The name hit me like a jolt, and I tightened my grip on the doorframe. "What do you want?" She hesitated, glancing down at the floor before meeting my eyes. I found out everything. About Emma, about Ryan, about the baby. I left him. My breath caught. "Why are you here?" "I thought you deserved to know," she said softly. "And I want to say I'm sorry for everything he did, for what you've been through. I know it doesn't fix anything, but..." I stood there for a moment, unsure of how to respond. "I've been where you are," she continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I know how lonely it feels. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Her offer surprised me. It wasn't something I'd expected, and for a moment, I considered turning her away. But something in her expression, the raw vulnerability, stopped me. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. We talked for hours that night, sharing our stories over cups of coffee. Claire's experiences mirrored mine in so many ways. The lies, the betrayal, the slow unraveling of trust. Her presence was a strange comfort, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this mess. Claire didn't become a constant in my life, but her visit marked a turning point. It was a reminder that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about moving forward, about finding meaning in the wreckage. A year later, I found myself standing on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sun set over the Portland skyline. The air was crisp, the scent of pine carried on the breeze. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. Emma was a distant memory, a chapter that had closed for good. I had learned to let go, not just of her, but of the anger, the regret, and the what-ifs. For the first time in years, the future felt like a blank canvas, waiting for me to decide what to paint. And I was ready.